The college conundrum. Why school doesn't make sense anymore. The bargain the college bound are presented with is the idea that they will make a sacrifice, 4 years or more, plus perhaps taking on debt, student debt that's hard to discharge, in return for gaining access to jobs, high-paying jobs that will pay well and therefore justify the cost of the investment. At first blush, it makes perfect sense, but when you start digging into it, you really have to question what's the true nature of this deal, and is the deal really worth it?
Yeah, and it absolutely used to be worth it in our parents' generations. It was, you actually had the opportunity after your 4 years of school and the debt that you take out, you had a better opportunity to get a high-paying job. Why is this no longer the case? If we look at a chart of GDP, we were on a very strong trend line going back prior to 2008. Once the great financial crisis hit, we had a drop in GDP. But ever since, we have not recovered and grown at the same level that we were growing at.
Yeah.
If we just go and look at the numbers, if we continue to grow at the same rate as we were prior to 2008, we are losing about $10 trillion of economic activity. That would provide millions of more high-paying jobs that would support the jobs that we need to have our growing middle class.
Yeah. And furthermore than this, you talk about, or if you've watched this channel long enough, you've seen other macroeconomic channels, videos, whatever, right? You're familiar with the concept of bubbles, particularly bubbles that are blown through debt. College is no exception. When you have colleges that are able to pass on and just keep jacking up the price of education over and over and over again due to the debt that students can take out, debt that's very easy for students to take out because of the dark side of the debt in the sense that it cannot be easily discharged, you have the exact opposite, Joshua, what's going on right there, where you have, let's say, maybe an economic slowdown, or perhaps you would have, let's say, the market sending back a signal saying, okay, well, wait a minute. Yeah, of course, there's a time and a place for school and higher education, but the free market might say, not necessarily at these levels. That signal, I would argue, can be overridden by debt that's very, very easy to get. Now, I'm not necessarily closing down the argument saying that one should be precluded from borrowing from school, but the question then I think becomes, how much should one borrow? With the more that one borrows, the more that one risks, or the more that one is rolling the dice, that from the degree that they get, they will also get the high-paying job or a higher-paying job than not having the degree to justify the entire endeavor to begin with. And this takes me to my second point, and Josh, you were just making this point as well. When I look around for myself, the people that I know who've gone into trades, and so they flirted with the idea of going to school, maybe did a semester or two, dropped out. But I'm talking about, again, from real estate, I know a fair amount of plumbers, electricians, HVAC, and there, you want to make money in Houston, there you go, be an HVAC guy. And the point is this, you have people that were able to apprentice, it took maybe like 2 or 3 years, and just to be clear, you know, there was some learning that's involved in it. But at the end of the day, when someone's pipes blow up, people find the money. When the AC goes out, especially here in the South, you find the money. These farmers are another good example. We seem to have completely forgotten that there's this entire division, jobs that need to be done, critically important jobs. And I would say jobs that are arguably more important than having another well-credentialed financial analyst who works for Goldman Sachs. You need people who can do stuff. And the second thing, Josh, is that from these people who go into the trades, yeah, it might take 2 or 3 years, but they start their own business, or they learn very quickly how to start their own business, a huge plus, I would argue. But then they can easily make, you know, if not, let's say like 100K, they can flirt. They can flirt with 100K. And this is where it gets interesting, when you factor in that there's really no debt, particularly hard to discharge sticky student debt that will anchor around their neck till the day that they die, assuming they, you know, don't pay it off in advance. I think that's something that should consider. Anyways, put a bow on all of this. The concept that school, like going to a 4-year plan or beyond, has a monopoly, or this is the only path to get to financial stability, to get to a good paying job, that is fundamentally wrong. And moreover, I would say it is also equally as wrong saying if you go to school, you will therefore automatically get a good job. Do not believe that for a second. School is by no means the only way, nor is it the Garden of Eden that perhaps many people, myself included at a point in time, thought that it was in terms of opportunity.
Yes, may I also add that the government makes the most income from students paying off college debt. That is their highest income producer. So they have the direct incentive to push college for themselves. But with that aside, the school system failed me in many ways, but the main way it failed me is that I got zero education from it, because me and Justin are massive proponents of education, and school used to mean education because that is where you were taught the valuable things. But you start in preschool and kindergarten, and every single year your teacher will say, oh, that's not going to work next year. You can't just do this or that. You can't copy or just slack off on tests and still pass every year. But then you go on to elementary school. They say it won't happen in middle school, then middle school and high school. And there was never a time in my school period where I had to use my brain and think critically, except for one class. That was it. I had one class that was useful in my 12 or 18 years of school. I'm now 19, and I made the decision not to go to school as I feared that the same thing would happen there. And once I started to learn for myself, I realized how much I loved actually learning, that I'd never got any of that actual value from the school system. And it was just, it crushes me to think how many kids could do so many great things, but they don't get educated because teachers, they don't need to teach. They just throw a worksheet on your desk and tell you it's done by the end of the week. What does that gain for you? What skills are you learning that you can incorporate into your life? The path that I took was much more apprenticeship, and if you're gonna fail most of the time, I offered my services for free to many different people, about 20 people that I had a lot of respect for. 2 people emailed me back, and I'm still in contact with them today. One person asked if I wanted a job. There's many ways to do about this, and school system is definitely not the only. I will also add one more thing, that my goal was to make money. I am a greedy libertarian entrepreneur that wants money. And I also want to run a business. So if I want to learn to run a business, who is the better person to learn that from? The professors at school, where they have been teachers their whole life and they don't make much money, or maybe 50, 70K, not pretty pathetic, or a business owner who has ran many multi-million-dollar businesses. Who will you get a better education from if your goals are money and business oriented?
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite quip is that I think that there's a reason that Klaus and his buddies get off on putting those square caps on people's round heads when they graduate school, if for no other reason to symbolize how thought and critical thinking has been distorted, but that's for another video. Josh, so also consider this too. I think that back when Martin Luther nailed his treatise, or when Martin Luther started the Protestant Reformation back in the day, his big the big comment was that you did not need a priest to go between the simple religious and God. So it was the point that you could approach God directly, the individuals could. And I think that same thing is true right now with school, where you see this revolution going on, where again, go back into the 50s and the 60s, particularly for the post-World War II boom, the GI Bill to send a class and a generation of returning GIs to school. I think that made a hell of a lot of sense. And also a note, back then, the price of school in real terms was materially less than it is today. So again, there might have been still the risk and reward ratio, but with far less risk, making it a better ratio from the perspective of the
as well as less people actually had the opportunity to go to college. It was a rare commodity to actually get that further education.
Yeah. Now, what you think you have today, and this is where YouTube, Locals, Rumble, whatever, social media. As much as I loathe social media, I credit where credit is due. The point is, as much that Martin Luther argued that you did not need the priest to be the counterparty between God and the simple religious, I think the same things come true with the education system, where you no longer need, to the extent, nowhere near to the extent we've needed in the past of the higher education system. Now, just to be clear, if you're going to do chemical engineering, brain surgery, if you're doing some very technical skill, so you need the precision and you need the rigor, because a lot of lives will potentially depend upon what you're doing. That I still think makes a hell of a lot of sense. But even then, we only need so many chemical engineers or whatever, right? But even then, this goes back to the thing where you want to pick something that's hard that nobody else wants to do. But again, doing some easy marketing degree from my perspective, an accountant or whatever, right? And lastly, there's this too. Rickards makes this comment, and I can't remember for the life of me what it's called, but here's the concept. Let's say that we know exactly what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. We can predict the weather with 100% accuracy, and if everyone takes an umbrella and a raincoat out because it's going to rain, it doesn't matter. The weather's going to do what the weather's going to do, or whatever, right? But when you have a system that incorporates feedback, so imagine the markets, for example. Let's say you have a perfect way to predict the market, or 99.99% way of predicting the market. Well, if everybody uses this system and everyone puts on the same trade, the system's going to the predictive function, the predictive power of the system is going to fail, because the more people that jump on, the more the system changes, and hence the logic that made the prediction work in the first place changes. I think the same thing's true of education. in the regard that when you have the financialization, the great financialization of the economy, for better or worse, again, separate video, okay, fine. You might need the credentials and the technical wherewithal to certify whatever that you've done this. Okay, I'll agree with that. But when you send, the vast majority of people, or if you overeducate the people with these credentials that they don't really understand and really can't use, say for the top strata, which would have figured out a way to do it anyways, then it's kind of like, what are we really paying for? Because you have people that are indebting themselves with debt that they can't discharge, that they still have to service, only to go through and start working at a job that they didn't really need a degree to work at in the first place. So they're down at least, 2 years, probably 4, if not more years. They're down the lost opportunity cost from the debt that they've borrowed. They really can't get out of it, and it's just horrible risk to reward ratio, I would argue.
Yeah, so let's break this down. First off, you go to school, and you have the economics behind it are very bad. So economically speaking, do you have it? I don't know the exact statistics, so I'm going to underplay it. It is more than this, but 1/3 of people who go to school end up back home and working at a minimum wage job. That's 1/3 of people.
Yeah, I would just add, the only thing worse than no deal at times, or back up, no deal is better than a bad deal. Never forget that. Never forget that.
Yes, so now the economics are against you. Then we do know the people who take risks and who do something against the crowd usually have the opportunity to get the best reward. So now we have a society where everybody goes to school, and if everybody is doing something, then there's usually not great opportunity that lies within there. Oftentimes this is the case. So if we take that at face value, there of course are going to be exceptions, people who do very well and get that high paying job after school. But for the most part, when everybody does something, the vast majority of people get a average or below average result. So there's a lot of headwinds, speaking just through the facts that college is not for everybody. You have the economics behind you, you have the crowd that's going towards it against you, because usually the crowds are often, they get medium to below average results. And then the third thing, everybody, because I would be a freshman in college right now if I did choose to go so. All my friends are there. And what are they all doing? Justin, could you guess what kids are doing in college? It's shockingly, you are drinking, partying, smoking. You are doing things that are not generally great for furthering your education.
Learning how to hate yourself, learning how to hate the West, etc. In closing, also to this fact too, I'm amazed at how many Zoomers that I've come to know, and of course perfectly happy to know. It was always nice seeing the next generation come up, but I'm also very pleasantly surprised and impressed by how many of them have said they've just looked at the situation, mostly males, and it said like, look, this just isn't worth it. I'm paying this much, and this is what I get out of it. And a lot of them, not all of them, but certainly most of them, from my very limited experience, are bucking the trend. They're just simply saying, no, I will figure out what to do on my own. I've saved up some money. So number one, they figured out that part, right? Because if you're going to start on your own, you kind of need to have a little
you
bit
need
of
to have a plan too.
Yeah.
Like that, you don't just not go to school and then you continue to do what you were doing before.
Yeah.
You have to be very aggressively working very hard, or you will be much worse off. You'll be worse off than if you didn't go to school.
Tangible sacrifices right now to build the nest egg, and more importantly, they're not afraid of rolling the dice. Excuse me, they're not afraid of rolling the dice if they think they're rolling the dice, if they've got an edge on it. But they are certainly not willing to roll the dice if they think that it's just going to be a losing proposition. Again, no deal is better than a bad deal. So, anyways, my takeaway point from all of this is that if one is, towards the latter half of their high school career, by no means think that school is a must. By no means think that school is the only path to success. And by no means do you think that if you get into school, you will suddenly be in the Garden of Eden of opportunity and whatever. You might be in quite another spot. But anyways, food for thought.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and do think critically. We'll see you in the next one.
Take care.